Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a seriously epic cinematic journey through time to uncover just how interconnected, how breathtakingly advanced, and honestly, how incredibly fragile the ancient world really was. We usually like to think of history as this slow, steady, predictable march upward, right? Well, as we're about to see, the truth is way more dramatic than that. So before we get into the catastrophic darkness that literally swallowed the ancient world during the infamous year of 536 AD, we first need to understand exactly what was at stake. To really grasp the terrifying suddenness of civilization's collapse, we have to recognize the staggering heights of ingenuity humanity had actually managed to achieve. We're covering a massive historical epic today. It's a sweeping narrative that stretches all the way from the earliest sparks of human gaming and settlement, rising all the way up to the clash of ancient superpowers, and then finally culminating in the terrifying twilight of antiquity. So let's start right at the very beginning. Part 1. The Dawn of Human Ingenuity. We're kicking things off not with massive armies or towering monuments, but with the raw, brilliant spark of early human invention. It is honestly mind-blowing to think about. Roughly 12,000 years ago, long before written language was even a thing, indigenous peoples in the Americas were already dealing with the complex math of probability through high-stakes dice games. And then flash forward to 3000 BCE, the Corral culture in Peru was busy building the Aspero Observatory. We're talking about complex circular stone platforms specifically designed to track the sun, moon, and stars so they could anticipate seasonal changes. Absolutely wild. And as these early civilizations really found their footing, we get to hear their voices through these beautiful first-hand accounts. Take the Sumerian praise poem of Lipit Estar from around 1935 BCE. It's proof that human culture wasn't just surviving back then, it was thriving. It was deeply sophisticated, filled with music, literature, and this profound reverence for their leaders. Moving into Part 2, Legends of the Bronze Age. This is where we see those early sparks build into legendary heights, and where the line between myth and reality starts to spectacularly blur. You know, for centuries, we kind of just assumed Homer's epic tales were nothing more than beautiful stories. But as modern archaeology leveled up, especially with the renewed excavations at Troy back in the 1980s, we realized the truth. Those epic, blood-soaked battles of the ancient Mediterranean, they were terrifyingly real. The legends of heroes and towering city walls were actually grounded in true historical warfare. Meanwhile, over in Egypt, the stakes were just as high. You had these groundbreaking leaders who were actively pulling their empires back from the brink of total destruction. The archaeological record, including some recently unearthed funerary complexes in northern Egypt, shows us the brilliant political maneuvering of figures like Egypt's trailblazing first queen. She literally held a fracturing realm together through sheer willpower and incredible strategy. And you have to remember, this era wasn't just a bunch of isolated kingdoms keeping to themselves. It was defined by intense global friction. By 1274 BC, that friction absolutely ignited into the Battle of Kadesh. We are talking about a massive, bloody clash of chariots and infantry between the Egyptian and Hittite empires. It was basically an ancient world war, with superpowers fighting for total regional dominance. Which brings us to Part 3, when ancient empires collide. As time marched forward out of the Bronze Age, the world didn't just fracture apart. Actually, it connected in some really surprising, deeply complex ways during the Classical era. Picture this. You've got Rome completely dominating the Mediterranean with this vast, well-oiled military machine. But thousands of miles away, Han Dynasty China is simultaneously expanding its own massive reach. Now, we usually think of these as totally separate worlds, right? But recent evidence of trade goods moving along the earliest iterations of the Silk Road proves that the ancient world was way more connected by hidden economic threads than we ever realized. The demand for luxury goods was literally linking continents thousands of years ago. But beneath those grand trade routes and the towering marble statues, there were real people enduring unbelievably harsh realities. First-hand accounts from ancient Greece describe the intensely brutal, hyper-disciplined life required to become a Spartan warrior. The foundation of these great empires was often built directly on the ruthless militarization of their own youth. And yet, right alongside that brutal warfare, there was just stunning beauty. Take a look at the history of the Nimrud ivories, discovered in the ancient Assyrian capital. Dating from the 9th to 7th centuries BCE, these intricately carved pieces reveal an unbelievable level of craftsmanship and sheer luxury that just flowed right through ancient veins. All right, part 4, Africa's Untold Stone Kingdoms. You know, history's spotlight is notoriously narrow, and it often misses true greatness. So we're going to shift our attention away from the Mediterranean for a moment and look at the majestic and far too often untold medieval kingdoms of Africa. 800 years. I really want you to let that number sink in. That is the unusually long, continuous lifespan of the extraordinary Didi West 1 metalworking site that archaeologists recently uncovered in Senegal.
Just consider the sheer scale of production here. While other industrial sites from this era usually only lasted a few generations at best, this massive Senegalese operation ran non-stop from 400 BC all the way to 480. With 25 furnaces and over a ton of slag left behind, this single site basically fueled the regional agriculture of an entire society for centuries.
And if we travel further south, the incredible stone architecture of medieval Zimbabwe is forcing experts to completely rewrite the history books. By studying these magnificent houses of stone, archaeologists are figuring out that power and wealth in ancient Africa weren't just hoarded in one single capital. Instead, they were shared and decentralized across highly sophisticated political networks.
Which brings us to part 5, history's most terrifying collapses. Because guys, here is the really chilling lesson of today's explainer. No matter how advanced, wealthy, or politically sophisticated a civilization gets, the thread of history can always snap. So let's unpack the Bronze Age collapse. It's this massive historical concept that perfectly illustrates just how fragile interconnected societies really are. In a remarkably short window of time, these advanced civilizations that had stood strong for centuries literally just vanished into the dust. But how does that even happen? Well, it was a cascading domino effect. It wasn't just one bad day or one single event. When natural disasters disrupted those vital trade networks we talked about, the economic pillar completely fell. That led straight into widespread famine, which then triggered desperate mass migrations and violent invasions. Because these ancient superpowers were so deeply interconnected, when one fell, it dragged the rest of them right down into a dark age.
And then, hundreds of years later, humanity went through it all over again. The year 536 AD is widely considered the absolute worst year to be alive in human history. A massive atmospheric anomaly, which was most likely a colossal volcanic eruption, plunged the entire world into an 18-month-long winter. We have first-hand accounts from Rome all the way to China describing this mysterious, unrelenting fog, massive crop failures, and a global terror that honestly felt like the literal end of the world.
So, that leaves us with a pretty vital question to ponder. We've just seen how the hyper-connected, hyper-advanced empires of the past were completely toppled by cascading environmental and economic dominoes. Now look at our highly globalized society today. Are the exact same unseen forces that toppled the ancients quietly undermining our modern civilization right now? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.